ahead and get started. If there are some stragglers, that'll be okay. I think they'll be able to figure out where we are since it's pretty well known, our topic tonight. We're going to talk about holidays that were celebrated here at National Park Seminary and National Park College. Before I delve into, I sound like I'm screaming. Is this really loud? No? It's okay? Okay, it's good. All right. I'm going to go through sort of the holidays in chronological order because that's the way my brain works. But I wanted to give you a little bit of context on how important holidays were at the school. And the problem is that I can't really read the screen from here, and I have a couple slides where I'm going to need to. But you can read here that it says it's the purpose of the school to celebrate historic days, to become an agent as far as possible for fostering the beautiful traditions of the race. Don't ask me what that means, I didn't write it. And developing in the student a reverence for significant customs and festivals. So this is in the school catalog from 1912. So you can see it was really emphasized here. They put it in print. They really lived up to it as well.
I think it's the human race.
We'll go with the human race. I like that. An excellent assumption. And here, it's a little hard to read, but this is a continuation of that catalog that shows the events that were going to be celebrated that year, or that were celebrated the previous year, to be honest. That's how they published them. And the ones that are highlighted are all the actual holidays, and everything else is all, like about a quarter of the other things that they were involved in. So amidst rushing for sororities and sightseeing during the first months of school, and later musical performances, hall meetings, sorority meetings, committee meetings, lectures by staff and visiting speakers, plays and concerts, and of course, they did go to class every once in a while, there were plenty of holiday celebrations. And we know that there were lots of fond memories expressed in letters home to parents, which we have a number of in our archives, as well as the alumni bulletins. And one alumna wrote in 1944, just after the school had closed, quote, "Do you remember the preparations for Halloween when chills of anticipation ran down your spine and were quickened into realization as the glen became a ghostly scene of horrors with the discordant clanging of chimes giving an eerie mood to the night? Do you remember the carol service when the candles of prophecy were lighted? On Twelfth Night, did you follow the wise men to the star over Bethlehem? Did you leave the chapel with other white-gowned girls to partake of a white dinner on the night of Candlemas? Did you powder your hair to become one of Martha Washington's ladies, or did you become a white-wigged, pantalooned, chivalrous gentleman on February 22nd? So that's a little preview of what we'll be seeing tonight. But you can see how they really built up each of the holidays that were celebrated. Another remembrance was that of the first president, President Cassidy. And this student said, "Whatever you did was interesting to him. And for you, he gave thought and labor in a lavish way. He loved ceremonial days, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and May Day. And while generally it was Mrs. Cassidy who conceived the idea of a celebration, it was Mr. Cassidy who reduced her vision to terms of possibility and by his own labor brought it into actuality." So, started with the first president when the school opened and continued through the next two administrations and nearly 5 decades of the school's history. And the first holiday that was celebrated here was, of course, Halloween. That was the first of the school calendar year. And it was one that the staff, as opposed to the students, was largely responsible for planning, and certainly they were very excited about it too. This is what the former dean of the entire school had to say. "That last night in the month when ghosts walked with human beings, when our feet slipped on moist things crawling in the grass, when our hair tangled with spidery things falling from the trees, and when our blood ran cold with eerie sounds coming from everywhere. Ah me, wonderful October in the glen." And that was Dean Mumford, who was actually known as being a very stoic woman. So to have her express her love of Halloween in this way was a pretty exciting quote for me to find. So the events that were held on Halloween itself were an early supper, followed by this ghost walk that they're referring to through the glen, followed by a dance and a costume contest in the gym. The first record we have of Halloween is this card or invitation, I'm not sure what it is, that was mailed to a student, Frances Anderson, in 1896. And she wrote home that year to her parents in Massachusetts that she dressed in a shirt and a mask and had lots of fun. So we know that they were celebrating 2 years after the school opened, at least. We also have a letter home in 1920 where the student said to her parents, "We'll have some night here on Saturday. It's the night we're going to celebrate Halloween," and they say it's some night. One tradition at Halloween parties of the day and here at the seminary was fortune telling. These are all clipped off the internet, so they're not from our archives. But very often the fortune telling was centered around telling your future husband or your future wife. And it also involved looking for your true love's initials in mirrors or finding your future mate. I think this one on the end here on the far left is about finding your future husband in the looking glass. So there's a lot about mirrors. And we know at NPS that Halloween fortunes were given out also as early as 1896. And here we have some pages. The two on the right are from 1896 from a scrapbook, and she has a picture of her husband cut out of the newspaper. There's his name, or his initials, and his, a rich man. I guess that's not his profession, but, and then one down below as well from 1928. Later in the school's history, we see more commercially produced fortunes. One set of fortune cards from the 1930s, and those are the two on the left, would predict your future husband's appearance and personality, as well as the number of children you would have. Another set used the woman's hair type to describe her personality and predict the type of man who would seek her out. These are actually 3 examples that are from student scrapbooks. But my favorite kind of fortune that we find in the scrapbooks are the ones that are handwritten. And can I take this off, Steve? No? Okay. I'm gonna do my rock star move and lean the mic over. So they're hard to read, that's why I wanted to come over here, but there is a handsome man who is asking for an introduction to you, et cetera, et cetera. And down below, you will be married in the sweet by and by. I like the one in the middle. You will be the chief ornament of your husband's brownstone front. He will be a bank clerk. And then my favorite, well, my 2 favorites at the end. He will look like the sort of person you would not let play in your yard. And below that is a really funny one. In this, if somebody might have to read it for me. In the sweet by and by, your face will turn to pie, and then kick the bucket, turn up your toes and die. They're so blown up that they actually get a little fuzzy on screen. But these are just great fun, and these are just a few of the selections that are in some of the scrapbooks. And here I have a whole page from a scrapbook where somebody put her remembrances, from Halloween. But the big event for the evening of Halloween after the ghost walk was, of course, the costume dance in the gym. And here we have a view of it from 1935. With the girls all in costume. And you can see the Halloween decorations back on the wall. And I'm going to show this. I have no idea what it is, but it was in a scrapbook. It says, "What the well-dressed ghost will wear, 1940, a la Paris." And I'll just put it up there because it's funny. And while I tell you another little story, for which I don't have an image, and that is a memory that was recorded when the students were asked, tell us what you remember most about the school, to publish in a what they remember section of the 1932 bulletin. And Ms. Gertrude Aldrich wrote in that her memory was, quote, falling off of one of the Glen bridges during the ghost walk at the Halloween party and being obliged to spend the dancing moments of that evening in the infirmary instead of the gymnasium. So poor Gertie, the ghost walk was not without its troubles. So next, of course, was Thanksgiving. And unlike most schools in the country, the girls did not go home for Thanksgiving. They stayed here. I mean, occasionally a girl would go to her home, but for the most part, the school encouraged all of the girls to stay here. And the schedule of events on Thanksgiving was essentially the same year after year. Started with a chapel service, and then a sporting event, then a big Thanksgiving dinner in the afternoon, and then that was followed by an evening entertainment. Over the years, the sporting event changed from basketball games to hockey games to East Side versus West Side, seniors versus juniors, etc. And the evening entertainment also changed. It started out as a theater party going into town, and they would take the train down to go see a show. But as the enrollment increased, this became more theater groups going to see different plays. When the school opened up its Thanksgiving events to friends and family, they also included sorority open houses after dinner, so if the girls wanted to visit with their families, they didn't have to rush off. And we know that by 1932, another choice was included, and that was taking a taxi into downtown Silver Spring to go see a movie. Regardless of what they did in the evening, Thanksgiving really was probably the single biggest one-day celebration at National Park. One remembrance says that, quote, "In preparing for one of the first Thanksgiving dinners at school, Mrs. Cassidy heard of some new table decorations offered in the city. Mr. Cassidy went to Washington to find them. Being successful, he started back by trolley with a package heavy enough to tax 2 men. Now in that day, the trolley ended at Silver Spring with no friendly taxi to finish the journey. This did not discourage the shopper. When the trolley stopped, he lifted the load to his shoulders and walked the remaining 3 miles to Forest Glen. All of this was done that the girls might find greater pleasure in their first Thanksgiving away from home." So I thought that was really sweet. And here we see the regular dining room without its decorations from the same period, and then it dressed up for Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving, here's another view. Thanksgiving was so big at National Park that it was covered by the features editor of the Washington Herald in 1933, so they ran a feature story on it. The article is quite long, so I'll just give you a few tastes. There is nothing else that even remotely resembles the celebration in the scholastic world. Unlike other seminaries and colleges, National Park is the scene of a gathering rather than a scattering of forces on the last Thursday in November. No student would dream of leaving the school on this occasion. Parents of friends come from far and near to join them in the celebration. The crowded hours from early morning when thanks for the year's blessings are offered in the picturesque chapel to the final curfew bell mark an unforgettable experience. And then the author goes on to say that they go into the dining room, they're escorted by their hostesses, and the dining hall is transformed into a field of rich harvest. Soft candlelight gleams on the tables laden with fruit and golden flowers. Place cards, designed and painted by the students themselves in the various sorority colors, mark the places of the several hundred dinner guests. And here are a couple of the place cards I found in some student scrapbooks. The one in the center is definitely hand-painted. The one on the right, I think, is a commercial production. And the one on the left, I think it's a basket with other things, but you can see it's definitely a place setting. So instead of the typical arrangement in small group tables, which was normal during Thanksgiving, the tables were arranged in very long rows, and each sorority sat at one of those tables. So the room was arranged by sorority, and each sorority was responsible for decorating their table. They really tried to make it they tried to one-up each other, I think, but they really went all out, decorating with fruits and vegetables, flowers. One year, 1939, there was a delightful innovation, was a log cabin on the guest table platform with a figure of a pilgrim, blunderbuss on his shoulder, bringing home a wild turkey for dinner. But here's the best part. Beside him stood his good wife, waiting to roast the fowl for dinner. So, that's how they brought these students up. Attractive menus were used between the courses, sorority songs were sung. So here are a couple of those attractive menu covers. Some done, they were all done on the press here, the printing press at the seminary, but you can see the biggest one is designed by a student. The other ones I think were probably the old-fashioned version of clip art. So what did they eat? Well, a lot is mostly, but what I really wanted you to see on this menu was that, does this have a pointer? Oh, look at that. Between each course, there's the name of a sorority, so Chi Pi, Zeta, Alpha, Beta, etc. And that was when that's why they were sitting at these long tables together, because during the courses, they would each get up and sing a song that had been prepared specifically for Thanksgiving. So it was usually to a recognizable tune, and they would write a poem to go with it. So each sorority would get up and sing a song. So you can imagine all of these courses, plus the singing between each one, was kind of a lengthy affair. And it was, if you can read it, a pretty traditional turkey dinner. So what they did in between, And we know this from the diary, which was transcribed, so it's all typed out, from a student in 1908, Charlotte Chafee, that she says, we sat down at 2:30, and just before the salad course, we went out, got the mail, and walked around for about an hour, and then they came back and finished the meal at 6:30. So, I mean, it was too much. So, and I have that in another student's recollections as well, that they took a break during the meal to sort of walk off a bit of it. And that, of course, is just a scrapbook page from somebody's scrapbook. So, next up, Christmas. So, Thanksgiving was always, and I don't have many pictures of Christmas, you should know, because it really wasn't a big holiday here, because the girls weren't here for it. Unlike Thanksgiving, when they were here, and a big deal was made, Christmas was the beginning of their winter break, 2 to 3 weeks, just like we have today. And it wasn't really a big holiday, but it did get more and more celebrated as the years went on. Initially, it was celebrated just with a simple candle-lit carol service in the chapel, just before the holiday break. We know that at least, excuse me,
You're doing fine.
at the moving into the 20th century, the schedule began to include a party with the staff, followed by small parties in each of the sorority houses, where the girls were
Oops, sorry, that's my bad. Put that back.
where the girls were allowed to listen to music. Oh, right. So they had little parties, little receptions in their sororities, and then they'd come back here to the ballroom and put records on the record player and listen to it through that giant speaker up there. So, you know, it was kind of low-key celebration. But the party with staff was kind of important because it was really the one time a year there was a lot of interaction between the students and the school employees, not including the faculty. So it was an opportunity for them to show their appreciation for all the hard work. At this party, Santa Claus always made an appearance, and the neighborhood children and the staff's children were invited, and they all received little gifts from Santa. And each of the staff were called up individually by Santa Claus to receive their holiday bonus. That was sort of the way it went. Santa, because I don't have many pictures, here's Santa. He was played, Google is great. Santa was played by Karl Bratz, a German immigrant who, among other things, worked for decades as the Santa Claus at Woody's department store until he was 87 years old. So he worked downtown, and he worked out here for 10 years as the Santa Claus at the Seminary. He was, I know, but the things you can look up. He was also a social worker. Okay, I'll just keep talking. If it hums a little, just ignore it. He was a social worker with the Central Mission in downtown DC, where he spent much of his modest savings helping others in need. He was cited in one news article for making sure that turkey dinners were delivered to some 500 folks in 1 year. So my thought is that Mr. Bratz proved that indeed there is a real Santa Claus, and he lived here in DC. In 1932 was his last Christmas at National Park Service after about 10 years being the Santa Claus. So at these staff parties where Santa would appear, the staff, whom the students and the faculty called the servants were in charge of the entertainment. In 1939, we know that there was an African-American choir that sang spirituals. I don't know if they were invited or if it was made up of the staff who were here, but that was the entertainment that year. And in 1941, the staff party was held in the gym, and we know that the program consisted of jitterbug dancing by the children, and then Christmas songs sung by an African-American choir. The children received gifts from Santa, the staff received their gifts, which were their bonuses, and each student was given a popcorn ball by the staff. Interestingly, I have this little snippet at the top from a scrapbook describing a baby theme for the 1939 Christmas. I don't know if I can read it from here. It says, "We are all dressed as kids, no one over 12 allowed. We went down to dinner this way. After dinner, we danced until Santa Claus came. Then all of the babies followed him over to the gym, where entertainment and Christmas presents awaited us." I don't know. It seems interesting, and it's the only reference I've seen to it, but I've seen of it. But we know that in 1940, the following year, even more events were added to celebrate Christmas. The chapel service that was held on the Sunday before the Christmas break was moved to the ballroom because the school invited the choir from the New York Avenue Presbyterian Church to join the school's glee club in the singing, along with a large number of guests. we know that the Glee Club sang 3 carols, and then the choir sang the Handel's Messiah, featuring soloists from here at National Park. And my dad would be very disappointed, he's a musicologist, if I didn't tell you that Handel's Messiah was an Easter piece of music, not a Christmas piece of music, just so you know. There, I've done my duty. But in typical of the school, no expense was spared on decorations. So the center box on the second floor, so right over up here above the fireplace, held life-size statues of Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus, along with the 3 wise men. And above them were the guiding star and angels. All of the boxes were draped with greenery, and there were 5 candles between each one. And you can imagine this room in candlelight with all of the Christmas greenery draped around. I think it would be really lovely. The schedule for Christmas 1941 was a carol service in the morning, or the one day, and then the next day they had, the carol service was here in the ballroom for the second time. The Glee Club sang again. On Tuesday night, there was a holiday party for the servants in the gym. Wednesday night, there were Christmas tree parties in the sorority houses. On Thursday, there was a Christmas dinner in the candlelit dining room, and then the senior Yule log party was held here in the ballroom. This was a very late addition to the seminary's repertoire for Christmas, probably only started in 1940, 41. The Yule log festivities were sort of a quasi-medieval overtone. They involved a town crier, a lantern bearer, and a Yule log dragged by 7 seniors with everyone in rented costumes. A recital of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas was given by a court jester, and as recorded in the Alumni Bulletin of 1940, quote, "In costumes fitting to the occasion, a group of seniors dragged the large log through the center of the ballroom and placed it on the already burning fire." So that's right behind me. Christmas songs were sung, dancing enjoyed, and the girls went to their rooms to pack with the spirit of Christmas reigning in their hearts. The last year that the school celebrated Christmas, the Yule log party climaxed with a real sleigh on rollers that was brought into the ballroom bearing Santa Claus, who then passed out presents to the president and Mrs. Davis and candy canes to all the students. So they went all out that year. So after the holiday break, when everybody went home, they came back to school and got right back to it. 12th night. That is the 12th night after Christmas. And all of these holidays, 12th night, Candlemas, Mardi Gras, Junior Carnival, they were all sort of interrelated. And that's true in popular culture as well as here at the seminary. They started out with a religious overtone and kind of morphed into more of a party event. And in the later years, 12th night here at campus became a little less significant as Mardi Gras grew in significance. 12th night is on January 5th, the night before Epiphany. And one of the traditions was to bake a cake, and this is the same with the Epiphany cake or a king cake at Mardi Gras. You would bake a cake with a bean or a pea inside of it. And the man who finds the slice with the pea becomes the king for the night, and the woman who finds the pea becomes the queen for the night. So following this selection of king and queen, the 12th night parties would continue to include the singing of carols as well as feasting. And here's a letter home from 1911 describing the process here at National Park. She says that each sorority elected a girl to be queen of that night. There were 8 queens, like nominee queens, and the way they decided on it was this. Each of these 8 girls took a slice of cake. I can't really read it. Each one took a slice of cake, and the one who found the bean was the queen for the night, and she got crowned, and she would preside over the 12th night program. And here is a program from 1920 showing you sort of the sequence of events. In the early years, the event was definitely less polished than it was in these later years, because we know that one alum wrote that, quote, "We were apt to refer to 12th night flippantly as the procession of the bathrobes and couch covers. We did not at that time have the Francis Wilson costumes to draw upon, and certainly every nook and corner of the place was denuded to furnish forth costumes for all." So I think they had a lot of fun doing it. And I know we have some folks who sew their own clothes and who are very fashion forward. I think you can relate to wearing a couch cover perhaps, or not. So Mardi Gras, this sort of morphed into a Mardi Gras, which grew and grew in importance. It was also called the Junior Carnival or the Junior Fete. It gained that name because in 1907 or 1908, Mrs. Cassidy made the event all about the juniors. And you can see what some of the events were, and they sort of changed year to year, but it was essentially a 3-day or 4-day event with lots and lots of activities, and the school basically shut down in terms of learning. And here is an invitation that shows the events to which you could invite guests. This is actually an invitation to guests telling you about all the public opportunities. So they could come to some of these events. And some of the other ones were just for the students. And here are a couple of pages from scrapbooks documenting it. I love, oops, I don't know what I just did. Okay. This is a dance card from the class of 1918, so you can see the 18 on it. And it says junior prom on it. I'm assuming that was her date. And over here we've got the program from the senior play, the chapel performance, and an invitation. And here is the full gamut from 1920. Chapel service basketball game. Oh, and I love how she's labeled it. Big, that's the program. Bigger, it says up there, bigger is the play, and biggest was the dance. And that's probably because it was really the only formal event, like really formal, for the men. That's like tails and a tux. That the school had for co-ed, as a co-ed event. So it was really exciting for the girls to have their dates here. Let's see. So in 1932, Mardi Gras, as it often did, coincided with Valentine's Day. So this is a picture of the tea dance that was held in the gym, which was less formal, although still quite dressy. It was described as follows. Guests stepping through a huge heart at the entrance of the dance floor saw a canopy of suspended hearts fluttering above the heads of the dancers. At the far end of the gym, the orchestra was framed in another heart. No less thrilled than their elder sisters were the sub-juniors, who were granted the special privilege of attending the tea dance with escorts, and that part's in italics. Excuse me.
Sorry, did you say this is 1932?
The photo is from 1932. I take it back. The quote is from 1932, but I'm making the assumption because the decorations match the description.
It says 1940.
Oh, well, there you go. I didn't see that either, and I probably cut and pasted slides and left that on there, so ignore my mistake. I think this is, well, somebody who can look at their hairstyles can probably figure it out. At any rate, they had a dance in the gym, Valentine's themed. Don't question me anymore. Other tea dances in the gym had decorations as well that were not Valentine themed. One had balloons and colonial figures in silhouette. One had a garden flower theme. And oddly, one year, there was a red, white, and blue bunting and streamers with Mother Goose figures around the balcony. Each year, the formal Mardi Gras dance was preceded by the junior promenade. This was where the juniors and their dates marched in formation around the ballroom, led by the class president and vice president, and reviewed by the class sponsor, who was stationed near the fireplace. The boxes were occupied by alumni, faculty, and the seniors with their dancing partners. And I have a quote that says, "As the impressive march progressed, their efficient sponsor smiled approval as she reviewed them from her position near the fireplace. Then the black of tuxedos joined the profusion of color on the floor, and while earrings flashed and corsages perfumed the air, the minutes rushed on toward 1 o'clock and regretful farewells." And a note about earrings, I was fortunate to find this in a 1933 announcement. "In former years, we longed for a privilege which has come to present students. For the past few years, the wearing of earrings during Mardi Gras festivities has been permitted. It is needless to add that the permission has been used enthusiastically and lengthily as to kind of earrings." So I thought that was a little note of jealousy from a former student who never got to wear earrings, and it shows you that the girls really took it to heart when they could wear earrings. They really wore them. By 1940, the Mardi Gras festivities had expanded further. On Friday evening was the senior play, followed by an evening, not a tea dance, an evening dance in the gym with dancing. Oh, that's probably what that photo was. Maybe 1940 was the evening dance in the gym. We'll go with that. I was right all along. With dancing and refreshment until 2 a.m. On Saturday morning, there was the East-West basketball game. On Saturday afternoon, the seniors hosted a tea dance with dates at the Hotel Carlton down in D.C., and then hurried back to school with time to get ready for the dinner dance that evening. That year, approximately 600 faculty, students, guests were served in the dining room. So, and then this is what it said. The dancing was to the Harry James Orchestra, which would be pretty impressive. I mean, his first album was it was a couple years earlier than this, and most of his albums were much later. So this could have been an early performance by the Harry James Orchestra. At 1 o'clock, a cafeteria-style breakfast was served. So, I mean, that's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of events. And so, especially introducing another dance that wasn't even here on campus, that they had to ride the train or, the streetcar down to, the next year it was at the Shoreham Hotel. And it was held from 3 to 6 in the afternoon, which barely gave them enough time to get back here for supper at 7 o'clock, and then change in their formals. And as if that wasn't enough, February is also the month, there's a nice photo of everybody dancing, of Washington's birthday, which was also a big deal here at the seminary. It was also often called the Colonial Ball, and here we have an invitation from 1907 and a dance card from 1915. This was not a dance to which male guests were invited, so this was just the girls themselves. And it was a dress-up affair. They rented costumes or used what the school had in its theater department. We have a letter from 1898 home saying, quote, "I do so wish you could have seen the costumes. Annie Denson was a little Dutch maiden. I made her cap for her. Eula was Columbia in the red, white, and blue with stars. Evangeline was Martha Washington, and Maddie Allen was Nellie Custis. Anna D. was the devil, a very good character for her. That's almost too mean. Miss Priest was Free Cuba. Mr. Cassidy furnished the music, and we had such lots of fun. Also, ice cream and cake." So that's 1898. I don't know why somebody would dress up as the devil to this event, or even really a Dutch maid, but they, any excuse to wear a costume, I guess. And here's some more photos. In 1933, Washington's birthday fell on a Wednesday, and the girls were allowed to skip afternoon classes, and instead there was an inter-sorority basketball game, then the colonial dinner and ball, followed by refreshments in the dining room. Remember, this is all in the same month, maybe a week or two after Mardi Gras. I think that's all I have. Oh, no, there's one more. Showing them dancing in the ballroom in their colonial dress. In March and April, there was the Easter holiday. Once again, the girls were not here. It was over their spring break, so I'm not going to focus on that. Although I did find lots of interesting tidbits about what they did on their spring breaks, so that might be a future talk. But the next holiday that they celebrated was May Day, which is May 1st. It's a celebration of the coming of spring, and it was the final holiday before graduation, which, believe me, was a week-long event of its own, also the subject of another talk. But the May Day schedule was always, one of the sororities hosted a breakfast, and often there was also a lunch. The riding meet was important. The typical May Day procession, crowning of the May Queen, performance, tea or supper, there was a May pole involved, and then there were evening events. And I say as usual because it really was pretty typical that they went into town for a play or something. In 1928, I have this lovely description. I know I'm reading a lot of quotes, but some of them are so well written. It says, "May Day dawned like a dream. Robins sang, everyone got up early. The 105 seniors, Mrs. Ament, Miss Munford, and Miss Forsythe found they could be comfortably, if systematically, seated within little old Kiopai, to which they had been invited by daffodil summons. There, apple blossoms, tulips, violets, and other spring flowers made the dream fragrant, and charming vari-colored paper chapeaux, when lifted from before the place cards, revealed rosy strawberries to begin a jolly, delicious breakfast, expeditiously served by Kiopai juniors." And there you see the invitation to one of these breakfasts on May Day. And this, I believe, is a paper hat. It may have been a paper bouquet. It's awfully squashed in the scrapbook, but it was on the same page, so I'm pretty sure it was a May Day bouquet or hat. Then, of course, it was off to the riding ring for the riding meet, which was where the students could show off their skills, which horse riding was a big part of the campus, particularly after the teens and 20s, really in the 30s. It climaxed, and a lot of the girls had their own horses here on campus. And so here are the events of the competition, and you could write down who won each one. And here's some nice photos of our lovely equestrians. You can ask in the end. In the later afternoon, it would be time for the real May Day festivities to begin. Each year, the theme was always centered on a traditional May Day, Old English May Day celebration, which was a medieval-era festival celebrating the rebirth of spring, with performances of music and dance, a maypole, Queen of the May, and over the years, there were, of course, some variations here. One year, George and Martha Washington made an appearance. There was a year where Robin Hood and Maid Marian were part of the festivities, and the location also changed from year to year. But one constant was that the festivities were always presided over by the May Queen. And the Queen was selected by the students by vote about a week before May Day, but no one knew who the winner of the election was until May Day itself and when the pageant began, and she came out with her attendants. The selectee was supposed to be someone who exemplified a good student and leader. So it was often somebody who was a class or a sorority officer or a girl who was otherwise well known throughout the student body. And this is an image from the early 1920s of the May Queen with her attendants on the circle before the fountain was put there. So that's our circle right out front.
When it still had trees.
When it still had trees on the circle, correct. And her attendants were, she usually had train bearers and one or two girls selected from each sorority as her attendants. We have a 1928 description that was in a different location on the abutting Amitdale farm, which is where the Army now has their property. It was not long before everyone was wending her way to the new farm, where in a cleared glade the maypole streamers were fluttering, the throne was arranged, and magic blossoms had sprung up on the leafy carpet for the children to pluck for their May baskets. It was an old-fashioned English May Day, picturesque to behold as the procession came into view, winding in and among the gray oaks, headed by two heralds with trumpets and banners, and ending with three tall, dignified, white-clad girls. That's the Queen and some of her maids. There was a character called Shadow of a Leaf. Robin Hood dismounted from his fine steed to crown the Queen. Beautiful Maid Marian was also there, and Friar Tuck rode in on his pony. There were also shepherdesses with a real lamb, foresters, milkmaids, and gypsies, maskers and maypole revelers, Morris dancers, besides the elves and the lovely spring ladies. So that's a lot of people. And here are the gypsies at the top. Gypsies and the milkmaids. And this is just showing another location when it was held down in the glen below the villa. And here's a program from 1916, and you can just see the number of, here's the pageant itself, that's just them processing out, and then the events, the performance itself. And here all the girls played the different parts. There's every kind of character. And this year, was this the one that had the Shakespeare theme? I believe that the May Queen was crowned by Shakespeare that year, and you see all these things. And I wanted to point out somewhere, I can't really read it, but there are nymphs, part of that 1916. And I think these are intended to be the nymphs, because the photo I know is from about 1916. They could be allegorical spring figures, but let's go with nymphs as part of May Day. And here's another program and a description from 1930. Never was a May Day pageant lovelier than the White House Festival on the Grove Circle at Amitdale. Preceded by stately ladies of the White House, the Queen and her maids came down the steps of the White House and across the lawn to a throne set against a great oak. On either side, the ribbons of a dainty flower-decked maypole fluttered in the afternoon breeze. Down from the broad veranda and up from the red barn came ladies and milkmaids to dance before the Queen. A passing gypsy wagon stopped, and the gypsies, gay in colors and spirits, sang and danced. The White House folk joined in the Virginia reel, and the maypoles were wound. The alma mater concluded a program as charming as it was novel. And you see this is a George Washington themed one, where It's, I believe, General Washington crowns the May Queen that year. How the Virginia reel fits in with sort of the medieval theme, I'm not quite sure, but they made it work. And here is another location. This is on the athletic field, which is where the new townhouses are across the street. And I'll read, sorry, I only have a quote, but it says, "At the sound of trumpets," oh no, I don't, this is 1940. This is, the picture's 1940, and the May Queen, I thought was a nice description of how she was selected. Her high ideals and excellent scholastic records through her 4 years make her more than deserving of the many honors her classmates have bestowed upon her. She was the class president for 3 years in a row, so that's how she, I think, won the election. And here is an image from the Alumni Bulletin from 1941, showing them dressed casually for the riding meet, and then Storky, Dolores Stork, one of the girls here, jumping, and the crowning of the May Queen, who was Helen Tuning that year. And she was deserving of this honor bestowed upon her by her classmates. She is a born leader and has given much to the school in her 2 years. She was president of her sorority and editor-in-chief of the Acorn. The dances given for her benefit were most fitting for the occasion, ending with age-old maypole dance. After the program, a picnic supper was served to the large school group and the many guests. And that was the tradition, a picnic supper that was served on the porches of this building, Main, out in front, and on the lawns to end the May Day celebrations. And that also ends our discussion of holidays, because after this, it was only graduation. And that is when the girls would leave the Glen for perhaps the last time. But I did, before we quit tonight, want to share a couple of additional slides for some little tidbit I picked up while doing the research for this. I don't know if you can read these, but these are a couple of menus from less important holidays here, Candlemas and Valentine's, and I don't know if you can sort of pick up on the theme of these, and then I'll show you when you get a chance to read through. Here are the ones from St. Patrick's Day, and you'll see the puree of green peas, pickle sauce, cucumbers, turkey with capers. It was all color coordinated with the holiday, so all the food matched. So everything on St. Patrick's Day had a green theme, and if you go back and look what they were eating on Valentine's Day, it's beets and stewed salmon, or I don't remember, but all red stuff, and Candlemas was entirely a white meal, ending in vanilla ice cream. I just thought that was fascinating. So with that, those are all the holidays. I'm happy to take questions, but I really want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. I had a lot of fun doing this research, so if you want to ask any questions, feel free.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.